So welcome back to part 2. Now, what I want to bring your attention to, particularly, is page 206. This figure 3 on page 206, because really this captures the essence of what this article is all about. Now, first of all, I want you to imagine you're thinking about where to send your kid to school. And so, once a year we have the published figures about the performance ratings of different schools according to certain criteria. So, for example, school X has so many percentage of kids who go on to university, so many percentage who get A's at A level, etc., etc., etc. Science subjects, it's all broken down, isn't it? We're all familiar with that. And the reason one is able to see how particular school X is doing in relation to all of the other schools is because of the published data. So there's national benchmarks, if you like, national figures, national averages, etc. And one can see then whether the school you're thinking of sending your kid to is how it's doing relative to all of the other schools. So this is really very, very similar to what we did with Quest cognitive hypnotherapy, to say how is the school of cognitive hypnotherapy doing in comparison to the national standard of the day, which is the IAPT service that has obtained hundreds of millions of investment across the country. So it's a very reasonable thing to do, but it's unique. Nobody else, to my knowledge, certainly to date, has attempted to make this type of comparison and certainly hasn't published any figures about it. And so this is why I'm bringing your attention to this figure 3, because really if you can understand the message of this figure 3, you'll really understand the essence of what the article is all about. I'm just going to go forward a little bit here now and move this down so you can see this a bit better. Let's see. Okay. Now, the important thing is looking at Quest cognitive hypnotherapy. The important thing to notice here on this top left section of this diagram is that about 2/3 of the cases completed, and what that means is they were available, they attended more than one session, so they had a second measurement point, 2/3 of the cases. But notice that black section in IAPT is much, much smaller. In fact, it's only 23%. So less than 1/4 of the IAPT cases have a second measure available, whereas 2/3 of the Quest cases have a second measure available. Now, herein lies the rub, really, because if you think about it, you can only talk about the effectiveness of a treatment if you know about change that has taken place in that treatment. And if you're talking about the effectiveness of IAPT based on under 1/4 of the people who've been referred to IAPT, then you're not getting a very good representation about what's going on. And you can actually see how 1/4 of people decline treatment to begin with, and another 1/4 drop out of treatment, and then another 1/4 disappear for all sorts of other reasons, leaving only less than 1/4 actually measured, whereas with Quest cognitive hypnotherapy, more than 2/3 of the people were actually measured. So that's very, very important. And that has to be taken into context then when you come down to the bottom right here and you look at the reliable improvement in recovery. Now, reliable improvement means there's been a significant level of change. Recovery means that the final score is below what's called the cutoff of the measure. You're scoring what I describe as the normal level of misery that the rest of us suffer from. And so you've recovered if you're back scoring in that range again. Now, please notice the best IAPT services have reliable improvement rates of 65%. Quest cognitive hypnotherapy is 73%. The best IAPT services have recovery rates of 56%, and Quest cognitive hypnotherapy is 71%. But you see, the story is even better than that again, because of course, when you realize down here, reliable improvement and recovery in the bottom left is only 10%, because remember 3/4 of the people never get measured a second time. So the actual, real, reliable improvement in recovery rate for people attending IAPT is far lower than the published figures of 65%, as you can see here. Now, this takes a bit of digestion, but it's all to do with the numbers of people who are simply not being measured, and the plane's flying over now anyway. So the take-home message from this is Quest cognitive hypnotherapy is an acceptable form of treatment. 2/3 of people in our cohort went through treatment to a second point of measurement, as opposed to the global figures for IAPT were really a much smaller number, less than 1/4 actually make it to a second point of measurement. So that's the first message. Secondly, even accepting all of that, the reliable improvement rates for Quest cognitive hypnotherapy compare extremely favorably with the very best IAPT services. 65% for IAPT, 73% for Quest. And again, for recovery, the best recovery rates in IAPT services is 56%, Quest cognitive hypnotherapy 71%. Of course, there will always be the arguments. Yes, but you're dealing with a very small cohort, you're dealing with highly motivated therapists, self-selected for the job, you're dealing with self-selected patients who are paying privately, and all of that. The reality is the reality. You can't get away from the fact that this is a valid comparison using exactly the same measures as IAPT services that nobody else has done. And so it's something to be very proud of and to be very encouraged by. I hope that's helped to unpack the important message of the paper for you. Back for part 3 shortly. Thank you.